stand out at your next holiday party, or maybe you have a favorite dress that you just want to add a little bit more sparkle to. In this video, I'll show you how to transform almost any skirt or dress, including one you've already made, by adding a removable twinkling LED underskirt. You only need a few materials, which I've linked down below, and can easily get this done in a dedicated afternoon. So let's get started. For this project, you'll need some stable fabric like quilting cotton that coordinates in color with your finished dress or skirt. You'll need twill tape or bias binding to finish the waistline of the LED skirt, and you'll need hooks and eyes to attach the skirt to your dress. You'll need a pattern which fits your finished dress or skirt in shape. If you made your finished dress, you can just use the same pattern pieces. This is the Charm Pattern Circle Skirt, a free pattern on their website that I'll link below, and what I use for my finished dress. You can also use a different skirt pattern. The pattern I'm laying out now is the Charm Pattern Stanwick skirt, which is also a full circle, and what I'll be using to create the LED skirt in this video. Of course, you'll also need some LEDs. I recommend purchasing LED fairy light strings. These are 3 variations that I purchased on Amazon, and I'll link them all below. But let's take a look at them so you can see the differences. This first one is a 20-foot 60 LED RGB string. You get 2 in a pack, so you can either go wild with the LEDs or save it for another skirt. The next one is just white LEDs, but it's 33 feet with 100 LEDs. You'll notice that these 2, this one and the RGB, have larger battery packs that require 3 AA batteries. It's not that heavy, but you do need a fuller skirt, A-line or more, to hide a larger battery pack in the skirt folds. This last type are short 7-foot LED strands with only 20 LEDs. They have a much smaller battery pack. It's much slimmer. This is good if you are doing a more fitted skirt, so the battery pack won't be as obvious. You can always use 2 of the smaller strands since they're so slim and lightweight if you need to cover more of the skirt. But let's go ahead and put some batteries in so we can see how these light up. The other benefit to the larger battery pack is that they will be a bit brighter. Both of the larger battery packs come with a remote control, which you can use to change the mode of the LEDs. Changing the mode of the LEDs is particularly useful with the RGB LEDs, where you may want to change the color, make them twinkle, make them breathe. There are many options here, and you can really have fun with it. Finally, let's open that short strand that uses 2 coin cell batteries. And now let's go ahead and turn them all on so you can see the relative brightness. If you're making your outer dress, I recommend auditioning your dress fabric over each set of LEDs to get an idea of how they will shine through. This is navy sequin mesh from Secret Spark. Again, I'll link below. It's what I ended up using, and I really love it for this application because the LEDs shine through, but you can't see the strands, so when they're off, you'd never know it was there, making it a really fun surprise when you turn them on. This is some gorgeous sequin fabric from Blue Moon Fabrics, but as you can see, the LEDs barely shine through, so I'll likely save this for another project. Finally, I also wanted to show you that even quilting cotton can often show through the LEDs very well. Our first step is to adjust our selected skirt pattern by cutting off 2 inches from the bottom. This is an example with the Charm Circle Skirt pattern. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be using the Charm Pattern Stanwick skirt for this video. A gored pattern like this one is very helpful because the seams provide easy placement points for the hook and eye pairs that we'll use to attach the LED underskirt to the finished dress itself. The other nice thing about a gored pattern is that you can lay it out on quite a bit less fabric. I was able to do mine with 2 yards. And since there's less bias, I don't need to let it hang as long. The adjustment that we'll be doing to these pieces is that we need to remove 2 inches from the bottom of each piece. This is so that the LED underskirt isn't visible when it's hanging below the outer skirt of your dress. You can see that I've indicated that here with the gray slashings along the bottom of each piece. Once you've marked the 2-inch line, there are 2 ways to cut out your pattern pieces. The usual way is to cut your pattern on the line and then trace and cut your fabric as you would normally. I don't personally like that method because it alters my original pattern piece. Instead, I like to use a tracing wheel to trace the cut line on my fabric and then cut there. Let me show you how I do that as I cut out the fabric for my LED underskirt. I use the rotary method of cutting, and these are my pattern weights. Yes, they're just giant washers from Home Depot, but I find they work great. So the first step that I do is cut out all sides except the bottom normally. Then I take my tracing paper and lay it carefully under that marked line. I trace over it, and often I'll have to move my tracing paper a couple times to make sure I've covered the whole line. And I missed one spot, so let's just go ahead and get that real quick. And then I remove the pattern, and at this point I've cut 3 of the sides, and now I just need to cut that bottom side along that line that I traced. And by doing it this way, I keep my pattern intact for future skirts or dresses. Next, we're going to sew our underskirt according to the pattern instructions with a few exceptions. Those are mostly the zipper and the waistband. Seams can be finished in your favorite method or not at all. Remember that this skirt won't actually be seen. I'm pressing my seams open and then I'll serge them because it's fast and it prevents fraying. So let's talk about the zipper first. Basically, you don't need it, so you can leave it off unless you really love inserting zippers. I do recommend just finishing the edges, as you see me doing here, and leaving it open. Since you're not going to see this skirt, and your dress or skirt should have its own zipper already, there's no functional reason to have this one actually close. Now, if you have a lining and it attaches to the fashion fabric of your finished dress at the zipper, you'll want to leave that entire zipper seam open and finish those seams. So it's basically a giant circle that has a cut down it. Now you'll notice that I did not do that here. I am very nicely pressing those seam allowances under, and I'm going to go ahead and top stitch them. But I realized that later and will then rip out that seam between that bottom half. The reason you want to leave it open is because it makes it much easier to fit it under the fashion fabric of your skirt or dress without having to pull it up and over your lining. So we'll mark a point 2 inches below the zipper stop, and that's where we're going to put a hook and eye. Now, of course, I have to go rip that seam as I mentioned before. While I do that, I will point out that if you don't have a lining on your skirt, then this becomes much easier and you can just leave the place where the zipper would be open and you can sew it below that point. You may also notice that my hem is finished, and I use that term loosely because really it's just a serger stitch. Again, fast and easy, it just needs to not fray because this skirt won't be seen. Now we're going to go ahead and sew the hook and eye at that point 2 inches below the zipper stop. And this will just keep the circle skirt together at that point below the zipper, prevent it from flopping around. But to be honest, you don't actually even need this if you don't want to. However, I do find that it keeps the skirt laying nicely on the lining, especially if the two skirts are the same size and are large skirts like circle skirts, as in this case. Also, please ignore the little white fuzzies on there. I have 2 very sheddy dogs, and that is what happens. I've sped up this hand sewing a little bit, but I'm not going to make you sit here while I sew both this hook and eye on because I tend to sew very securely. So let's go ahead and jump forward just a bit. And then I can give you a look at what the skirt looks like when you connect the hook and eye together. If you're enjoying this video, you can help me by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. I'm kind of restarting my channel and want to do more videos like this or exploring other ideas I've got, so I'd also love your feedback. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see more of. Our next step is to finish the waist. The goal is to have the waistline finished cleanly where the seam line would be if you were attaching a bodice or waistband. To mark that seam line, I'm doing a long, easily removable stitch at the seam line in a contrasting thread. This is optional. You could mark it with chalk as well. However, if you did not stay stitch your waistline before, now is a good time to do so to ensure that it does not stretch out. I'm going to use twill tape for this, but you could use bias tape or even serge it. Again, you want to make sure that this waistline does not stretch. I'm stitching the twill tape to the right side of the skirt, aligning one edge with that seam line that I marked before. Then I'm going to trim back that seam allowance so that it's shorter than the twill tape. Next, I'll press the twill tape to the wrong side, folding along that marked seam line. Even if you didn't manage to stitch right on the edge of the twill tape, folding it on that marked seam line will give you that finish that you need to have it right at the seam line. Then finally, I'll stitch that down. You can do it from the right side or the wrong side, but this is going to give me that nicely finished waistline. Another reason that I like using the twill tape is I find that the twill tape also gives a really nice base to secure the hooks to when I start sewing on the hooks and eyes to attach it to my finished dress. I have to apologize because my phone battery died while I was filming sewing on the hooks to the twill tape. But basically you want to place them at either end, the two side seams, and the middle. That's the minimum. You can see I tried that on and it was not enough, so I added 4 additional hooks, one between each pair. You may find you need more or less depending on the length of your waistband and how secure you like it. But this is where the gores come in handy. Those seams give you clear points to attach additional hooks, and now you can see how much better it hangs. Now let's sew the eyes to the lining of our finished or outer dress. In some sets of hooks and eyes, you actually get bars as well, and I ended up using these since I didn't have quite enough eyes left over. I apologize for my head being in the way for part of this. You can mark the same locations, either side of the zipper, side seams, and middle, and then I like to hook those on and mark where any additional hooks hit before sewing on the additional eyes. The 2 eyes that are near the zipper need to get way up in there. It's a bit challenging, but don't stress about it. As I've mentioned before, no one will see it, so it doesn't have to be perfect. If you don't have a lining, you can also attach these eyes to the lower edge of the bodice in the same locations. If you do that, I highly recommend using the eyes and not bars because you'll want them to hang down just a bit so that you can catch them with your hooks. And now you can see how easy it is to catch those eyes or bars with those hooks. You can either do it while the dress is flat, or I've done it while wearing the dress as well. Earlier I mentioned the battery pack and how we will want to hide that in the folds of the skirt. We'll need somewhere to store that, so we're going to make a small pocket for it. Start by cutting out 2 5-inch by 5-inch squares. Lay them right sides together, if you have a right side, and then we're going to stitch along 3 sides, leaving the 4th side open. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance in this case, but you could go bigger or smaller. There's actually quite a bit of ease and space allowed with this particular pocket. Next, you'll want to go ahead and clip your corners so that we can get a nice square finish. And then we will take it to the iron and turn it right side out and press it. There are multiple ways to make a pocket like this. You don't have to make it double-sided, but this is a way that I find fast and easy to do it. Now you will notice that my point turner pushed through the corner there. As I've mentioned many times in this video, this is not going to be seen, so if that happens to you, don't worry about it. I'm not worrying about it. We can just keep going. So yeah, give those sides a good press, get it as square as you can. And on that open end, you're going to go ahead and turn those in your seam allowance, which is 1/4 inch in my case. And again, give it a good press. When we sew it down, we will seal that up. Next, we want to place it and sew it down. I like to place it along a side seam, and in particular, I like placing it on the side seam on my non-dominant side. That's because I always put pockets in my dresses, and I always put my cell phone in my right-hand pocket. So I'm putting this on the left-hand side so that when I put my phone in my pocket, it doesn't bang against the battery pack. Take your time getting that pinned into place. You want to make sure that it is fairly flat against the skirt. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch down the side, across the bottom, and up the other side using a very narrow 1/8 inch seam allowance. Be sure to backstitch at the start and finish. The battery pack does have some weight, so you want to make sure that this is a pretty secure pocket. And of course, we want a final test, and you can see how nicely the battery pack fits in there, and as I mentioned, has plenty of ease. It's finally time to attach the LEDs to the skirt. This is my favorite part because it's the most creative and artistic, in my opinion. You get to decide where you want to glow. The first thing you'll want to do is start by laying out your skirt as flat as you can. With a circle skirt, this is fairly straightforward. For skirts with less volume, like say an A-line, you may need to lay out half, lay out the LEDs, then flip it over and lay out the other half. Put the battery pack in the pocket since that determines your start point, and then just start putting the string of LEDs down as you like. Again, the longer string of LEDs that you have, the more you have to work with. And you may decide that you just want more LEDs and need to add an additional pocket on the other side or next to this one. I'm putting my LEDs along the top because I want them to give the effect of candlelight. Maybe you want yours to look like you have a shimmering hem of light. It's totally up to you, and I encourage you to have fun with this part. Once you've laid out your LED string, hold it down with pins. I recommend testing it out to make sure you like the layout. It can look very different once it's on the body of the dress, and if you have a mannequin, great. If not, I recommend trying it on and having someone take some video of you. Now is also a good time to decide if you want LEDs on the back as well as the front. The strings are pretty durable, so don't worry about sitting on them, but just decide if you want to have the light visible from all around. Now is also a good time to move around in the dress and make sure that your hooks are secure. Once you turn the lights on, things you'll want to keep in mind are if LEDs are getting caught in the folds, if your pocket bags are covering any LEDs. You can also see what different colors look like, and maybe some work better than others with your particular dress. In my case, after I tried it on my dress form, I found that I wanted some of my LEDs in a slightly different placement. So I moved them around, and at this point they're just being held down with pins, so it's actually very easy to move things here and there. One thing you'll want to be careful of is to make sure that your wire doesn't have any sharp bends or kinks in it. These lights are pretty durable and often meant for outdoor use, but bends or kinks can lead to weakness and sometimes breakage. And after you've put this work into it, you really don't want it breaking while you're wearing it, having your lights go out. Once you've got it in place and made any adjustments, give it one last final look. Make sure you're happy with how your lights are looking, because next we're going to go ahead and sew them down or glue them down depending on your preference. The last step is to make sure that our LEDs stay where we want them the whole night. So to do that, we're going to tack them down in place either with glue or by hand stitching. Before we get to that point, the first step is to actually make sure our LEDs are facing out. While sometimes these lights seem like they glow in a 360-degree way, which they do, they are brighter in one direction. If you look closely at each LED, you will see that wires go across one side, and the other side is your bright side that you want facing up. So you'll want to make sure that each LED has the bright side facing out for maximum impact. I'm actually adjusting mine and gluing them as I go. I'm choosing to use E6000 fabric fuse in order to glue down my LEDs. You could also choose to do this using the hand sewing technique that I'm going to show in a moment. However, I find it much easier to use this glue. Once you've glued all your LEDs down, you'll want to let it dry. A note about the glue, you may also need to add a few more pins on either side of your LEDs, as I'm doing now, in order to make sure that the LEDs are held down to the fabric so that when the glue dries, they are firmly adhered. I've sped up this section a little bit so that you all don't have to watch too much of me doing this, but it's actually a very fast process and took me no more than 10 to 15 minutes. After the glue has dried, which in my case was the next day, I decided to let it cure overnight, you'll want to go ahead and remove all of your pins. Now, you could just stop here. You don't actually have to sew down any of these wires. The glue will attach the LEDs just fine. However, I like having things pretty sleek and I don't want anything to catch on the wires, so I decided to sew them down as well. If you don't want to use glue, you can use the same technique to hold down either the LEDs or the entire wire itself. Right now, I've got a close-up using a contrasting thread, but I will actually use black thread in the final version. I'm just doing a very long running stitch. It's almost like following the actual string, and it just catches the string and holds it down flat against the fabric. So I'm going to go in now with that black thread, and I'm just going to go over the entire strand of LEDs. This seems like it might take a while, but this is a really long running stitch, so it's actually quite fast. And not just because I'm going to speed this up for you all, although I do wish that I could sew at that speed, but it really goes by very quickly. Once you finish sewing down the LEDs, you're all done. Time to put your LED underskirt on your dress and turn your LEDs on so you can glow. Thank you for joining me for this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful and can use it to shine at your next event. Leave a comment to let me know what you'd like to see more of or anything you'd like me to expand on. Do you want to see how I made the main dress? Or perhaps you want to see the same technique on a fitted skirt? Just let me know. And of course, like and subscribe if you want to be notified of my next videos. Until next time, have fun.